I suddenly sort of realized, like, well, sales have got HubSpot or whatever CRM. Finance have got Zero, Sage, QuickBooks. Ops have got Trello, Monday, ClickUp, Microsoft Project, God help them. Um, every team in the business has got a system. They're all doing complex, difficult work. They've all got a system. And then you look at the leadership team, the people making the most consequential, most impactful decisions in the business, and you go, what have they got?
Before we jump into this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube, and after a listen, please give us a thumbs up, like, and share, if we've earned it. With your help, we can reach more people and deliver these valuable From the Trenches lessons to those that need it. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another The Builders. Today, we are joined by Matt Mower. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Hi there, Matt. Good. Thanks for having me.
A lot of Matts here today. So, Matt is the co-founder and CEO of Agendascope. And what does Agendascope do? Why don't you let us know? Actually, you're going to be better at it than I am, letting us know. What do you guys do?
So what we're trying to do is help directors direct, help leaders to lead. There's a lot of management, organizational stuff that gets in the way of growing your business. So we're a SaaS platform designed to help you focus on the right things.
Awesome. Well said. This is like a new thing I've been doing. I've probably said this multiple times. Just let you say it because I would probably mess it up. And you're much more eloquent. Anyway, so the first time we have somebody on the podcast, what we want to do is we want to learn a little bit about you, your history, your kind of your origin story, how you became the entrepreneur you are today, and doing the amazing things you are doing in the world, changing the world, and however you're doing that. And so just to kind of, speak to that journey and where you started, I think right before the podcast, you were mentioning something back in 88. You were doing like programming or something in 88. A little while ago.
So, yes, I mean, I started programming in short trousers, which is rather longer ago than I care to admit. So, yeah, I mean, certainly in the 80s, and I probably started writing what you might call real software in about 88, 90. And I was programming right the way through to sort of 2000. That was my job, my career. Then I joined startups and moved into kind of more management type of stuff. So leading teams, ended up as CTO of a few businesses, and then around about 2010 became a fractional CTO, as you call it now. And then from there moved into strategy and value proposition type work. So one of the observations that I had working with a lot of companies is they don't often have what you call real technology problems. A lot of the time, the problem is you're building the wrong product and you hired the wrong people to do it for you. Mm-hmm. And these are not problems you can fix from inside the technology box. Now, I'm not saying there aren't technology problems, but I was finding that most of the problems I was really interested in were really, why doesn't this work? And that wasn't really, you didn't build the right technology from a technology standpoint. It's you're building something that people don't want enough. Or you haven't really honed in on the things that really make this product work. Mm-hmm. I got more interested in those problems, and from there into strategy, business model, value proposition. And so I started doing that work. And that leads to Agendascope, because Agendascope is the evolution of that work.
Wow, we went fast. We were like, let's go back further.
I don't remember the 80s that well. That's my problem.
No, but one of the things that is always interesting,
yes,
we'll just linger here for a second, is like why entrepreneurship? Well, first of all, why tech? Is it something you always did or always had an interest in growing up? And
from almost as old as I can remember, I was very into sci-fi as a kid. So when I was a kid, books talking about we're going to be living on the moon and have robots sort of doing all the work. That's a sort of clear memory. Yeah. My dad was in electronics. Nice. And so my first computer was mine. I'd had some hand-me-downs, was a ZX81. So that'll give you some idea. 1981 was kind of when I started trying to program something. And And yeah, I loved it. I've always had an affinity for programming. It's an activity that I enjoy. I kind of got tired of doing it for other people, is the way I would put it. What put me off programming was there are bits of it I'm very good at. I enjoy solving problems.
Yeah.
I'm not a completer finisher by nature. And irritatingly, people hiring you to program would kind of want you to finish.
Oh
Saying
yeah.
I've done the interesting bits wasn't quite enough. I mean, I'm sure you've probably experienced this, right? So
Yeah.
it's like I've done the yeah, but I'm not really interested in doing the rest. Yes, but that's what we're paying you for. So there was a kind of an incompatibility with me and programming as a living.
Yeah.
Uh, and I got into the web quite early, so I was part of a university. Well, I'll give you an idea. So the team I joined was the Electronic Information Services team. So we were responsible for things like email, Gopher, Waze, Archie, FTP, and all that good stuff. And then the web came along for us. I think it was the end of '92. The idea of a web server for the university I was working for got mooted, and my boss, who was still one of the best strategic minds I've ever come across, saw very quickly the transformative power. He'd been very into, I mean, if you think about it, librarians, he was a former librarian. Librarians are all about information access.
Right.
He very quickly saw what the potential of the web was for changing how we access information.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spent very happy years building. I mean, we started out building stuff in Perl with DBM, if you remember back that far, right?
Wow.
And building what I would now call toy applications, but nevertheless applications that made a huge difference to people working in the university and studying in the university. I did that for a few years. Then I jumped into my first startup in 2000, which will tell you everything you need to know about my sense of timing. And
Yeah, if it was in tech.
yeah, exactly. I mean, this was maybe not the. I mean, I suppose I had some vague notion of going off and becoming a dot-com millionaire 10 years too late to pull that
Right.
off.
Right.
And I went through a series of what I would describe as not terribly well chosen companies. I mean, I didn't have a plan. I just kind of went from one place to another. I'm quite curious and eclectic, so that's not necessarily bad for me. I learned an awful lot from all different places, and I ended up as CTO of a number of businesses, which was a good role for me because it's kind of strategic, but you don't necessarily have to do stuff. There's usually somebody else to do for you, or at least your
Right.
job as
Right.
CTO is find somebody who can do the stuff. So that was temperamentally very well suited to me.
So that's kind of
And
what a
so yeah,
CTO.
so I did that for.
Sorry, that's kind of what a CTO does. The Chief Technology Officer. You're managing the products and the people and aligning all that. What's that? Kind of what is that role?
I always saw the role as how do you harness the technology to the needs and interests of the business?
Hmm. Hmm. Okay.
Often what you find is technology, and particularly technology companies with technology founders, the technology becomes an end to itself. Whereas I very much saw it as how do you harness this to the goals of the business? If we're investing in technology, what is it doing for this business in terms of where the business wants to go? And so I thought it was about how you marshal the technological resources of the business to deliver its goals. And I think probably that's where my interest in strategy comes from, because essentially it's the same thing. So how do you
Right.
form a strategy, and where technology is used to deliver part of that strategy? I don't necessarily say I did it very well, but that was my goal. That was my aim, was to make
Hmm.
strategy useful to the businesses who were often paying very large amounts of money to have it. Um, so yeah, so that's how I saw the role.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I was because CTO. You hear about CTOs all the time. What do they do? What do they do? But they're more about the strategy and tying it all together for the business goals.
I think people have different views of what's so in smaller business. CTO obviously often just means the most technical person in the business, and there isn't really a formal definition of what the role is. And certainly, I've done that in startups where I was just the person that knew the most about technology and therefore made decisions.
Yeah.
Um, I think there's a model of, because these days you have things like VP of engineering, which is a phrase that, so back when I started, we had technical director was what you would later end up being called CTO. VP of engineering, which is more involved in how the product gets built versus perhaps the wider technology strategy, where the CTO might be more about partnerships with other technology vendors and things like that. So there's a range of different models, often depending on the size of the business, and how tech savvy it is. So translator is another thing. How do you translate for people who maybe have a business background but haven't spent 20 or 30 years building technology to get what they need? And I think that's the highest. Feel like the highest role is how you translate technology into delivering for business, which often seems to be a little bit missing.
So when you go into a business, did you work in larger startups like that were well funded, or
No,
smaller?
mostly early stage and sort of scaling Series A, heading for Series B. That's the sort of size of business. So never with really big businesses.
Okay.
Partly, I really enjoy the energy of early stage startups. And it plays to my strengths in that I am curious about a lot of things, don't like to be told what to do, and have a range of strengths. So that early stage where you need people to be a little bit of everything plays really well to me. Once the box starts getting a bit more kind of squeezed in, I'm less comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's, going from programming and it's obvious that is like your wheelhouse. You don't want to get into the boring details. You want to do the cool stuff. You want to be part of the strategy and thinking and innovating and working with teams and stuff. What was like?
This is a very astute observation.
Yeah,
I don't want to do stuff.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes I'm sort of in that same boat. It's nice to get kind of lost in some mundane stuff once in a while, just to rest your brain. But I really like the challenging things, or having a team that can do some of the other stuff. But so what in those early startups, like what would you say was the most interesting one you were involved with, like that, and what kind of cool things came out of that, or the most successful, or however you want to define it? Like what did you enjoy the most? And
I think the biggest missed opportunity was a business that a friend and I did back in about 2004, which was a product called K Collector. So this was in the days of blogging and RSS, when these things were really starting to move from only the really nerdy people do it to maybe this will break into the mainstream. And I got very interested in something called XML topic maps and the notion of tagging things.
Oh.
And so I was using a blogging tool called Radio Userland at the time, and I built a tagging engine for it. And I don't know if I'm wrong about this, but I believe I'm the first person to actually tag posts, right? So I built this tool that lived in radio and allowed you to tag your posts and then push those tags into the RSS feed. And a good friend of mine, Paolo Valdomarin, he had the insight to say, well, if you took all these feeds, you could bring them together and create kind of like an ontology of blogging, right? So
yeah.
What you tag your post with and what you tag your post with, and we can take those tags and bring them together and say, what are people talking about around this? Which sounds now completely obvious, but at the time was totally non-obvious. And we were told, I remember, I won't name him, but an internet luminary telling me once, nobody will ever tag things. And we were a bit like, oh, really? Oh dear. That's where I started looking to AI for the first time, because I figured, can we get AI to tag things? Well, these days, yes. Back in 2004-5, very much no. And so I'd say that was the biggest missed opportunity. And that was partly because businesses were not yet ready to blog. Knowledge management, which we were kind of sat in an offshoot of, was not a widely accepted sort of domain.
Interesting, because that was around the time too. That was around the time too, like WordPress was just becoming a thing, Like more and more people were that. And in the beginning, for those that don't know, WordPress was actually just a blogging platform.
Yeah, it was just
Yeah,
I mean, and it certainly wasn't necessarily the winner. Movable Type at that time
movable type. Yeah.
had an awful lot of momentum. Blogger, I mean, if
Oh
Google
yeah,
hadn't killed Blogger might still be right. So there's all these
yeah.
tools. WordPress is now a ubiquitous CMS right into enterprise, which I'm sure Matt Mullenweg did not imagine back in 2003 when he was building the first versions. Um, uh, so yes, that was the one that I look back on and think, in an alternate universe, that could have been big.
Was there a clear way you were
I
going
mean,
to monetize it, or was it like how do you monetize tagging, or like
no, we were actually building a product for enterprises. So the idea was
okay,
it was a product that we were selling. The challenge was we were basically sort of saying, look, this is a sensor network, right? So if you could get all your people to blog, and you could wire everything up to do with the tagging the things they're blogging. You could then start inferencing and going, well, this person is talking about this and that's relevant. Maybe this is relevant too. We could start exposing stuff from lower in the organization to higher. I don't know if you remember, I'm not sure if it ever was a thing in the US, but there was a big scandal in the UK. I'm thinking it was probably about 10, 15 years ago, where horse meat was being imported from other countries and entering the human food chain in supermarkets in this country, right? Which is not supposed to happen. And this became a massive scandal. And it's always been on my mind that I'm sure that there was somebody in kind of meat receiving at these supermarkets looking at this stuff on a conveyor belt going, this doesn't look right.
yeah,
This
what
doesn't
you
look like the
would
stuff that we
think.
normally get.
Yeah,
And then you've got the CEO of Tesco, Sainsbury's, a major supermarket, splashed on the front cover of the Sun, the Times, the Telegraph, big newspapers, as this is a big scandal. And you think there's a connecting thread here where I'm sure they would have liked to know that Ted in meat receiving was going, this looks a bit fishy, boss. Somebody should check into it. So we had this idea you could evolve sensor networks to be much more aware of what was going on in your business, make join the dots. Who actually knows about this? Well, if you think blogging often was, I know about this, I want to talk about it. So how do you expose those people to each other? You want to know about this, you're talking about this, we should put you together. So there's a whole idea about a kind of grassroots knowledge management type of system. So we built a prototype, but we were probably 5 years ahead of there being a viable market for such a product. The
timing.
kind of people who would see this and go, I want to do that and I'm willing to throw the resources. We did find some, but that was pretty rare. Plus, I mean, I look back and think I was naively inexperienced at business at that point. We made lots of mistakes that probably neither of us would make now. I hope, maybe.
Hopefully,
So that's the one I look
yeah.
back and I think that was the one that was most mine and most missed. Um, I've been involved in a number of businesses that I thought this deserves to exist, which was kind of my reason for doing most things. Once I started to think, what you should really think about where you're going and not just go from thing to thing
Yeah.
was, are you going to make a difference? So I always try to be involved in things that make a difference. And Agendascope itself comes out of a desire to make a difference,
Right, right.
albeit in a different sphere.
That's interesting. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, business people, that are doing our thing, building stuff. It's never a clean journey. It's a messy journey, trying different things, failing, but you learn, like you said, you learn along the way. Hopefully, you've learned those lessons and you won't repeat them today. And maybe you
I've
mentioned
learned them so well I can repeat them precisely.
like, what was the biggest lesson from that one? Like, what would you not repeat?
I mean, I think the biggest lesson that I'm having to relearn again is you really, really have to be careful about the assumptions you make around your value proposition. And there's a trap here because if you think about the kind of people who become founders, become CEOs, they're typically people who think, I know better than you. And we know this because if I'm about to start a business and I say to you, Matt, oh, I've got this idea about doing this, and you go, that's a stupid idea, and I go, oh, you're right. Actually, yeah, it is a bit daft, isn't it? Yeah, it probably won't work, right? So you don't get in the room, right? So the people who start businesses, by definition, are people who don't listen to other people when they tell them that they're wrong, which is a bit of a challenge because you need to be told when you're wrong. So often your early value proposition is resting on a bunch of assumptions that you learned at the point where you know the least you're ever going to know about your product, your market, and your customers. But they form a lens through which you see everything. And I've done that myself in this business. Is early assumptions I made have been very constraining and turned out to be wrong. And it's taken me in some cases a really long time to go, shit, I'm actually completely wrong about this. I need to change it. This is especially ironic since the work I did before becoming founder of Jetscope was helping other CEOs to break the lens that they were seeing their own product vision through. So it's intensely ironic and annoying that I then went on to make exactly the same mistake myself.
So how do you correct that mistake? How do you correct that mistake? What is the approach?
There's bitter lessons in here. I mean, having good people around you that you will listen to when they question you and give a hearing to. I mean, I suspect I'm a little bit hard at hearing because it's taken me a while to listen to them. But it's really, I mean, I think a lot of CEOs, a lot of founders find themselves very isolated. They don't have people they can talk to about their doubts and fears and suspicions. So, you know yourself, in a business, as the leader of a business, if you ever falter and go, you know what, I'm not sure about this, you know everybody's taking their cue from you and is looking at you. So there's a built-in pressure to always be, to put the positive spin, to be talking in progress language, which doesn't allow a lot of room for doubt and reflection. So a big challenge is you don't have somebody that knows enough about what you're doing that they can point out where you're making assumptions incorrectly and doesn't have a vested interest in not pissing you off.
Yeah.
Right? So family can't do this because this is your baby and your dream. They're not going to tell you you're smoking something. Often you have business acquaintances who might be smart enough but don't know or are not interested enough in the minutiae, the detail of what you're doing to go, you know, that bit in there that this whole edifice actually rests on, that bit is wrong. You need to fix that bit, otherwise you're going to go horribly wrong here. So it's quite difficult to find somebody who's close enough to see both the macro and the micro and distant enough to go, Matt, you're an idiot.
You know what's interesting?
You've just got to stop and think.
Yeah. What's interesting, I think of two people that are founders or they are partners in a business and have been around, had this business for like 15 years. And I know them pretty well. And one of the things, though, I know, and I don't remember if one of them told me this, not sure, but I somehow learned this from them or somebody in the organization, that how they vet ideas and stuff is they kind of get in a room and they said they kind of leave their egos outside the door. And oftentimes they'll come together. One has this really brilliant idea. It's the best thing in the world. And the other one's just like, nope, this is why that's not going to work. Forget that. And then it's like, okay. But finding that is, like you said, is probably not very easy. I'm not sure I have that. I got people I can bounce ideas off of. I got my team or whatever. But I probably do things kind of isolated a lot. A lot of the decisions I make strategy wise and all that is kind of like just Matt making those decisions at this point. But yeah, I could see the value though in seeking out that person to validate an idea or shoot it down. That's got to be. Yeah.
It takes us. Part of the problem is when you frame the issue for them, you bring your lens with you.
Yeah.
So it requires that they actually see the lens that you're shaping ideas with, and can kind of look sideways around it and go, is this perspective even the right perspective? It takes a certain person to be able to do that and to have the relationship with you where they care enough that they're willing to irritate you, and your relationship is strong enough that you can carry the irritation. It's like, you won't shut up about this. I think you're wrong. But I'm actually going to go, well, yeah, but it's you. So I need to actually listen to what you're saying and try to understand rather than just dismissing you.
Right.
With the proviso that I've proved I'm somebody who doesn't want to listen to other people telling them that they're wrong. I mean, one of the reasons so many startups fail is ultimately bad assumptions. I mean, if we assume that while the actual reason is you run out of cash, but if that's the reason you fail, then advice like manage your cash flow better would fix all startups, and it doesn't, or at least so far.
Yeah.
So what underlies it is the assumptions that you made, often very early on, that become dominant of the solution space that you explore and the customer problems you explore. And you get that wrong, and it can be really very difficult to unpick. I mean, there's a great example which I used to talk about when I was talking to people about the perils of building technology. And if you think about a product is the result of about 1,000 decisions, right? A complex product, there's 1,000 decisions that might start with, is this a mobile app or a web app, right? And then right the way down at the bottom of the tree, things like, should this button be green or red? And the challenge often is when things don't work, how far up the tree do you go back? Often what happens is you've gone down a tree. So it's this type of app, and it's this, and it's this, and it's this, and this, and you're right, 20, 30, maybe 100 decisions down. It's not working. Okay, so you go back and you tinker with the decisions you just made. When do you go right the way to the top of the tree and go, okay, those very early decisions that we made, were they good? Okay, we made a web app. We should have made a mobile app, or we should have made a talk app, or we should have made, maybe it shouldn't have been an app at all. Maybe it should have been a physical device, right? You very rarely go that far back up. And often in a startup, you burn cash to get to that 1,000th decision. The idea of saying, no, we have to go back to decision number one, that was wrong, is terrifying. I don't have the fuel to make all of those decisions again. There's a real trap. The part of the problem here is the founder's journey doesn't look like this. I found a really interesting problem in people's lives, and I'm going to form a company to spend 6 months doing R&D, research, and exploring that problem and how it affects people. And then when I know enough about that and I can confirm it, I'm going to start a business and make a product. No founders do that.
I just
Every founder should. I'm as guilty of that as anybody, right? What happens is you imagine a solution. There's a moment where a light bulb goes off, where you've imagined the solution to a problem, and your imagination is powerful enough to overcome your inertia. And so it's typically product people who do this, right? Because we get that excitement of, I've imagined how to solve this. But that solution has already baked in so many assumptions about how this problem is experienced, whether this problem is experienced. A big challenge for people is they found a problem that is a problem, but not a problem anybody really cares about solving. So you go to somebody and say, do you have this problem? They go, yes. And you think, oh, amazing, right? But if you say, have you learned to live with this problem? Right? Oh, yeah, I have. Okay, so actually, is there an opportunity? Somebody said to me of my own business, it's like a gap in the market doesn't necessarily mean a market in the gap. I'm like, I really wish you hadn't said that, because that rings very true. Rings very true.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
But we don't do that as founders. We get excited about the solution and we want to make the solution. And so we have to be a bit lucky. And then most of the founder journey is all of the course correcting you do about the shit you got wrong right at the beginning.
Yeah. And then having a model of,
why did I do this?
Yeah. But that's kind of, there's a model of testing ideas too, and quickly testing them quickly,
Yeah.
There's a saying in the internet marketing world, money loves speed. It's just being able to test things really, really quickly. Did that idea work? Did that idea work? But I'm sure a lot of startups, like, they just have one idea and they're going all in on this idea, and and that's. I mean,
it's great advice, right? Test everything. Now, there are a range of problems here. So one is access to markets, right? Often you've identified problems that are in spaces that are adjacent. You've seen them, but maybe you're not right there. Methodology, how do you test, right? So, I mean, I would find clients who would want to use questionnaires of potential prospects. And there's two problems with this. One is, was a questionnaire the right tool? Or should you have used some sort of in-depth questioning mechanism? And two, when you built your questionnaire, did you know what answer you wanted to see? Because often the questions are not consciously, but subconsciously designed to lead to the answers that you subconsciously want to hear. So even if you do the research, you don't necessarily do the research. But if you go, right, I'm going to hire a good researcher to do this, it's expensive. I mean, good research is expensive to do. It's thousands and thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
Who has that money when you've got a product to build?
Or dollars.
Despite the fact that it might ultimately save you much of the cash you're about to spend.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Yeah, even questionnaire, there's a whole science behind asking questions. You can't just throw anything at people.
It's very hard not to ask leading questions. I mean, this is why you hire proper research people when you want to do this type of stuff,
right?
Because they understand biases and how you. When you do it yourself, it's really hard to write an objective questionnaire that might tell you what you don't want to hear.
Yeah,
which is what no CEO wants, right? I mean, it's being confronted with that. You've got this wrong. There is no market for this product. It's the last thing you want to hear. So writing a questionnaire that might lead to that, you might consciously say, yes, we're doing that, but your subconscious is screaming, this is unsafe. Do not do this. Ask them questions that lead them where we want them to go.
It's interesting.
That's hard.
Questionnaire, even like existing, if you have an existing list or customer base or whatever, asking questions of them, it's like, I know I've made decisions and probably I shouldn't have, based on a few people's like responses. You have like a list of like, let's say it's just 1,000 customers, and like you got 2 or 3 people that said you should do this. You're like, wow, that's the only feedback I got. I'm just going with that. And when like the other 997 were like, we didn't care about that, but you needed something. You needed...
Yeah. Questionnaires are often prescriptive in my experience, where what might be better is an interview where you ask open-ended questions and just listen to what people say and then try and tag the important. I mean, this is what I've been doing for my business recently, is having conversations with business owners where I'm trying to get them talking about the problems we think they have. So I'm leading them to some extent, but essentially we think there are these problems. Talk to me about your life in the context of these problems, and then trying to work backwards from that to go, okay, what are they really experiencing? How is it really impacting them?
Sometimes it's just what they're it's just what they're sharing. You know, like what really drove my direction with my agency and what we do today is all the conversations I had that I never asked the question. It was just what I'm like. Wait a minute, why do I keep hearing this same issue? Maybe I can solve that for them. You know, So I mean, that's tricky. I'm going to actually pivot us a little bit because I want to get into a little bit more about. This has been a great conversation. I want to keep going, but I want to get to this other thing. So you, when we first talked, you were talking about how you are doing something for leaders that other parts of the business have. Like leaders don't have this thing, this tool. To be more effective or whatever. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about what you're kind of doing for the leadership team that they need.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this all started with decision making and an observation that businesses often find decision making difficult. And there are a number of reasons. I mean, that's a podcast in itself, why decision-making is hard. Particularly that they often struggle to grasp opportunity. So there's something I've noticed, which is that businesses which survive get good at problem solving. But solving problems rarely creates growth. Because the problem bucket never gets empty, right? There's always another problem to solve. But what tends to create growth is seizing opportunity. And that requires that you be quite proactive, that you identify opportunities that might have significant impact, and you work to grasp them and squeeze the juice out of them. And that often the challenge was we don't actively manage the opportunity we've got. So, an observation I made quite recently is most businesses of a certain size have a risk register. They've got an Excel spreadsheet somewhere of some sophistication that lists the risks of the business. How many have an opportunity register that lists the opportunities available to the business, ranked by impact and ability to access, where the business on a regular basis is going, okay, these are our top opportunities. How are we progressing these? So Agenda Scope does that. It's frustrating for a CEO to see an opportunity and miss it. This could have been Act 2. This could have been the next phase of growth. This could have helped us hit our goals, but we just didn't get our shit together, identify it, grasp it, and do what was required to action it in time. We missed it. And the challenge is, unlike problems which are always coming at you, genuine opportunities are relatively rare. So can you afford to miss them? We also started to see problems around alignment, that as a business starts to grow and get bigger, you go from, so like my business has a singular focus, right? Our strategy is quite simple and there's just one thing. But there's a sort of phase shift where you go from that singular focus to suddenly there are 100 priorities. And not everybody agrees what they are or what we should do first. And that can be very disabling, that you go from being very tight-knit and cohesive. This is the destination we're rowing to, and we're all rowing like hell to get there, to people rowing in the opposite direction because they don't think that's important at all. They think this other thing is important. And that could be crippling. So how do you resolve those tensions? How do you get people to agree what is the agenda? And that led to an observation that businesses often don't have an agenda. Now, it's not to say you can't find one. If you go to a CEO and say, what's your agenda? They'll pick up the agenda from the last board meeting, or they'll sit and scribble for 5 minutes and go, here's the top 5 things. But is that to hand? Is it comprehensive? Does everybody in your team see the same issues? And would they agree this is number one? Could you just go, everybody in my team goes, this is the number one priority? And if so, how hard is it to keep that going? Right? And this is really where I made a sort of blinding flash of the obvious moment, right? Because a lot of this is about how hard it is to do. You need a system, but it's hard. And that's where I suddenly sort of realized, like, well, sales have got HubSpot or whatever CRM. Finance have got Xero, Sage, QuickBooks. Ops have got Trello, Monday, ClickUp, Microsoft Project, God help them. Every team in the business has got a system. They're all doing complex, difficult work. They've all got a system. And then you look at the leadership team, the people making the most consequential, most impactful decisions in the business, and you go, what have they got? Well, maybe they've got some Google Docs or a Word doc or a spreadsheet or two. Now, if your finance director came to you one day and said, you know what, I've decided we're going to get rid of Xero because we're going back to Excel. And instead of you having an always-on dashboard where you can see all the financial information, you're going to get a monthly report from my office as an Excel spreadsheet and maybe a Word document. What do you think, boss? I think you'd look at them a bit funny, wouldn't you?
How much money did that save us?
And yet, right? And yet, for CEOs and their team, that's the world they're living in. So again, it was kind of like, you need a system, but a system is hard to operate, right? Businesses ran finance off spreadsheets for donkey's years, and it worked. I mean, if you go back, they ran it off ledgers, and it worked. Mm-hmm. But the business with the ledgers had like 200 junior accountants turning handles and scribbling in a piece of paper. Right. Now the FD maybe has a bookkeeper, and everything else is a piece of software.
Yeah.
So you can run a system. But the interesting thing here is finance had a system, right? They knew how to do their work. It might have been excruciatingly difficult to give you the up-to-date information, but it was doable. There's a process. And so our view is leadership needs a system, a process, but in the same way, it's hard. So you need something to support delivery of that. And that's where the notion of a SaaS platform comes in, is it's the platform that enables the system, that enables you to do higher level work, stay aligned and cohesive around the right set of priorities, be accountable to how those priorities are being delivered, see the vision in the day-to-day. This is another challenge for CEOs, right? At the beginning, when you're the founder and co-founders or early employees, the vision is everywhere, largely because it's all you've got, right? You don't have customers or a product. The vision's it. But there's this point where the business starts to get bigger and more operationalized stuff is happening, and the vision can get sort of squeezed out of the day-to-day picture. We're doing too much stuff to be bothered about the vision. But if you think about what the vision really is, the vision is the roadmap to the future value of the business. How could that get squeezed out? That's got to remain central. But if you say to a CEO, how easy is it to keep the vision central to the conversations going on? Often I'll tell you that's quite hard. It's not that they can't do it, but it's a lot of effort because there's so much happening. Where is the leadership stuff? Often it's all over the place. It's in email, it's in Slack, it's in Notion, it's in this Google Doc, it's in this other system here. There's no single source of truth. So a CEO said to me the other day that they were on, I think they said like their third or fourth marketing director, who'd spent weeks coming up with the plan, delivered the plan, to be kind of like, but we tried this sort of X months ago. We know it doesn't work. Why do they have to create the plan to find that out? Where was the decision making about past marketing plans that they could have referred back to go, well, what have we tried in the past? What decisions didn't work? Do we know didn't work so I can do something new?
So have no historical data to...
Little historical data, little historical evidence. And if you think about it, often the way this works is, right, you have minutes from a meeting. The minutes, I mean, if you've made a decision, it's gone badly, and you look back and you go, well, what do the minutes tell us? They often tell you the decision was made, but have little or nothing to say about the substance of how you got to that decision. What other things did we try? Why did we pick this at the time? Oh, it was based on this report that at the time said we should. A month later, the new version of the report said we shouldn't, but nobody noticed that, right? Those details, all that stuff tends to get lost. And if you're asking people about the past, I mean, you go, okay, we made this decision a year ago, why? A bunch of people in the room won't remember. Did we decide to do that? I don't remember. A bunch of people will have left, so you can't ask them. And the rest are probably remembering what they wished they'd said, not what they actually said. Right? And so it could be really hard to tease out, no, Matt, you told us this. Your opinion was we should do this, not we shouldn't do this, like you're telling me now. Oh, yeah, it was, wasn't it? Okay, maybe I should shut up. All that gets lost. So what we're trying to do is create a space in which the leadership team can lead and lead with authority and clarity. We know what our priorities are. They're agreed across the team. We know we have accountability. We're making sure that the decisions that we take are getting executed and doing something. And we're aware of what's going on. We're seeing how this leads to the right place. That's sort of what I'm trying to do. So underpinning this.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
No, so is this, so what you're building, I think we have a little lag. It's all good. So are you building, so you're building a system, a SaaS platform that would basically gather all this historical data in some way and then be able to have like your dashboard that you could have an advanced search feature or some AI that can say, we got this idea, and they can go back and be like, well, we've had this idea before. Is that what you're kind of building there? If I'm understanding correctly?
I mean, essentially what we're building is, if you like, I mean, at its heart, I mean, there's two ways of looking at it. So if you come across OODA loops, the notion of OODA loops, Agentoscope is just a big software OODA loop. But essentially what we're building is a tool where you understand what are the opportunities and problems, risks, or threats that are facing you. and and for the ones that you want to pay attention to, how are you going to respond to them, and how did you respond? So it's kind of a database of things that are happening and the responses that you choose, with some intelligence around how those things are both presented, analyzed, and what you infer from them. Um, have you come across the notion of the OODA loop?
I don't think so. Explain it.
Okay, so it stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act, and it's the brainchild of Colonel John Boyd, who was probably the preeminent US Air Force fighter pilot back when dogfighting was a thing. So he was, I think, widely acknowledged one of the masters of combat fighting in planes. And his observation basically was the guy who masters his situation quickest, so gets to the optimum place and shoots first, is the guy that gets to go home to their family, and the other guy isn't. And so he evolved quite a significant amount of theory around observing your environment, orienting yourself to the salient features, where should I be, deciding the best place to be, making a decision, and then getting there. And so the whole thing was you have this loop, because the challenge with this is often businesses and everybody does this, but they don't treat it as a loop. I observe, I orient, I decide, and I act, and then I carry on acting. But the world changes around us. It doesn't stop for us.
Yeah.
So the problem is you need to recognize that your action has reactions, and therefore your action may change the world. I make a sharp turn in my plane. The other pilot doesn't go, well, he's still going the same direction. He notices and makes his own change, which changes the situation. So the notion of the OODA loop is you have to run this as a loop. I observe, I orient, I decide, I act. Then I observe again what's changed. I orient, I decide, I act. And the tighter the loop you can get, the more likely you are to succeed, because the more likely you are to, as the theory goes, to observe the correct changes in the environment, orient yourself to how those changes have made positions good or bad, and get there. This applies just as much in business. So a lot of sort of modern business or strategy thinking is really taking this OODA notion, which ended up being called mission command in sort of military parlance, bringing this into business. You observe what's going on, what's important. That can be things like new competitors, sales slowing down, I don't know, opportunity to open an office in a different country, opportunity to hire a particular person, difficulty in raising finance, changes of interest rates. There's all these stimuli. So observing those and going, what are the important things? Well, actually, it turns out being able to hire this kick-ass marketing guy is going to have the most impact on anything we do. So actually, making hiring this marketing person number one priority. What should we do to make this happen?
So it's
right up until it turns out, actually, you know what? It's not the marketing person. That window of opportunity's gone. Now it's this. What do we do next? So it's bringing that idea into a business to say, are you aware of what's important? Is the most important thing at the top of your agenda? Why are you talking about number 7 on the agenda when you haven't sorted number 1? Are you all agreed? Because if this group think this is the most important and this group think this is the most important, best case scenario is you're diverting 50% of your resources potentially in the wrong direction. Worst case scenario, you paralyze your organization. So how do we avoid that?
Yeah, I love the kind of like a real time kind of vision or view of your business as things change, as your environment changes, as things are going bad or opportunities present themselves. All that fed to you in some form that you can then do your orienting and all that other stuff in the loop, taking action and then I love that. I love that loop idea. That's actually really cool. I think with that, having that information, and then we're not going to get into AI today. we're already a little long, but I'm going to find we're going to be landing soon. But even AI, like when you mentioned meetings and stuff, you had a meeting a year ago and you had discussed something, right? and you made all these decisions. There was who was on that meeting, I don't know, but there was some decisions made, and they were referencing this data over here, that, and that's why they're making that decision. I imagine if there could be a day where you have like, and I know people are already doing this. I talked to some gentleman, I think he was on this podcast, probably one of our AI guys. And he was like, all his meetings, he fed into this database, and he could go and talk to that database and over that and learn stuff from all the meetings he had. Like he had like, hundreds of meetings, and he could like assess and get information from that and make, that I could see as a similar thing tying into everything else going on in your company, and being able to kind of see that, and be able to lead from that, like that top level kind of data. That's kind of, that sounds like that. It is a missing piece, because I look at just my business, like my agency, we got a lot going on, and we're at that point where like we're in the day-to-day operations and we're just getting stuff done. And of course I'm doing marketing. Of course I'm doing sales, and I'm writing proposals today, literally. And I'm also putting out fires before this podcast, and wondering where that fire is going to be after I'm done with this podcast. But all that stuff's happening. But at the same time, like, it would be awesome if I could just go to a system that's going to, okay, that's all's happening, but let's stay on track. Okay, this new information's coming in. Maybe you need to pivot over here or whatever. I love the concept, if I'm understanding it properly. Yeah.
I think so. And in agencies, something I've observed is often the challenge is more opportunities than we can actually handle. So you have a lot of opportunities and finite resources. And the question often there is, which of these opportunities delivers the most? Which are we going to say no to? And we have to say no to some, because if we try and do them all, we'll fail at all of them. So you have to say no. And it can be a real challenge picking the right ones. How do you bring the best thinking to bear to go, this opportunity is the one that we should go for, and we should say no to these others? Yeah. I found agencies seem to particularly struggle with that, with resolving that problem, where it's a big challenge to and to feel confident, right? The whole team have said this is the opportunity. I'm not going to get backbiting 6 months later with somebody go, oh, I told you to do X, Y, Z, right? It's like, no, we've seen this. This is it. That, I think, is going to be a big challenge.
Yeah. So this is our off ramp. If this has been a great conversation. I love this concept, and it's making me think about my own business and like how I can capture all this, and maybe it's a tool like you're developing. If somebody wants to learn more about what you're doing, where can they find you on the World Wide Web? You got the website, obviously. Agenda. What is it?
So agendascope.com is the website.
Agendascope.com.
But I would recommend to people, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm very easy to find. Connect to me on LinkedIn and have a conversation. That's the best way, I think.
That's fantastic. We love LinkedIn.
And I'm very happy for people to reach out and have a conversation. So,
great. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Matt.
I learn a lot from talking to people. Yeah. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.
All right. You take care. Until next time, I'm going to have you back someday. We'll talk more about AI or stuff and other things someday. You don't mind?
That'd be great.
All right.
I would love to.
All right. Well, take care. Thank you very much. That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already, and give us a thumbs up if we deserve it. Now a word from our sponsor, my agency, Unified Web Design. We build custom websites, features, we maintain websites, we work with agencies to fulfill their web design and development needs, and more. If you're interested in our services or are looking for an agency to work with as a partner to build awesome sites for your clients, feel free to reach out to me at unifiedwebdesign.com. There's a handy contact me link at the top. Fill out that form and it will open a ticket, and that ticket will find its way to me. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.